Yeah, so and then get that ready to go. Have a little bit of a different background and layout and everything because there's only two of us, and I still had the book club icon up from last time when we had six of us. I think there were, and I had to figure out how to do that. But I like the book club icon in the background for this. So, uh, okay. Oh, okay. I say he's saying he couldn't hear things, and I'm like, is my audio not good again? But my audio is good, so it's not technical issues on my side this time. It's a drill being used in the other room for. As I've discovered, that happens regularly. OBS doesn't like to remember my microphone, so I have to reset it up constantly. But apparently, my book club page or scene or whatever remembered. So, hello, Steal Your Mind. It's good to see you tonight. Mm-hmm. Are there other things that would be stealing our mind? Intellect of ours, you know? Yeah. Oh. Aha. I did have one audio issue. You had no volume, so he couldn't hear you. But now he
Okay.
should be able to. And that was because usually we have Tracy here, so I pulled the audio out of Skype from Tracy's account, and it catches both of you.
Oh,
So I have to mute one of you, otherwise it does a crazy echo. So, thank you. It's a good thing that you're
thank
there
you.
to remind us. Otherwise, the video would have been crazy one sided. We were
Yes.
discussing whether or not mind flayers exist in Dragonlance. I certainly have not uh, read comprehensively in Dragonlance. Like I've read the main storylines, right? What is it? Chronicles and Legends, and then
Yeah.
Summer's Flame, which was the one that came later. Um,
I've not read that one. So that's the one
oh,
for
you
the
you
fifth
haven't?
age.
Yeah, you haven't read Summer's Flame.
No.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's Fifth Age, and it's like all of the heroes you know are long gone now, and
Yeah.
what does Kryn look like way later? Um, it was an interesting. It's a thick book.
Mm.
Um,
So I've seen it.
yeah.
I have the Saga box
Oh, okay.
set. I bought it at a used store because I really like the Saga
Uh huh.
system because I ran Marvel
Oh,
superheroes
okay.
using the Saga
Uh
systems,
huh.
and it was it is fun and interesting because your health is the values of your cards, and just when you take damage, you have to discard cards that total equal or higher than the amount of damage you've taken, and you don't get to get back
Hmm.
in your hand those cards. And if you're out of cards, you're knocked
Okay.
out. So it's since and each time you do an action, you play and you draw till your hand side, whatever hand
And
side
it's
it is at
a
that time.
saga system specific set of cards, or is it just okay?
Yes, it had five for the Marvel one. It has five deck
Mm-hmm.
of cards: uh, strength, dexterity, intelligence, and willpower, plus
Okay.
the Doom suit.
Does it use dice as well, or is it just cards?
No,
Just cards.
just
Okay.
cards.
I as you're
It's
probably aware, my second favorite game in the world right now is Torg Eternity. And it does a
yeah,
card mechanic, but it merges the card mechanic with the dice. So
nice.
everything is resolved either with 2d6 or a d20. But then you've got these cards to do other weird things, and like the initiative system is done with
Yeah,
cards. So you shuffle the cards, and at the beginning of every combat, and you just sort of flip it, and it determines the order of who goes when, and it adds in other weird complications, so it could be, it could be something that's particularly advantageous to the bad guys, and so they'll get to go first. Plus, they get what's called an up, which means that they get to roll the d20 twice and take the best one. It's like D&D advantage, right? And
Yeah.
it might be labeled like, "Aha, we have you now," and it's all sort of corny, dramatic things like that, So,
Yeah.
so it's a lot
Sure.
of fun. It's very, very
Yeah.
thematic and cinematic, right?
Oh, Slimline has to leave.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Goodbye, Steal Your Mind. So, shall we
Yeah, we can
do
get
this
started.
soon, or?
We've been chit-chatting. and
Oh yeah, we've been chatting and all that. So, 'cause, yeah, Marvel also has those reinforcements. Oh, someone's in
yeah.
danger and stuff like that, which you need. Oh, it it was very good. And the interesting part is that the Doom suit, because the GM does not get any cards.
Uh-huh.
The Doom suit, which are the higher valued cards, when the player plays them, instead of being discarded, they are given to the GM so he can increase the difficulty, use it to increase the difficulty later on. So you see the struggle of players really
Is
buying
it
up.
the Doom suit like a suit of a deck of cards, or is it like Doctor Doom? Is he like the primary villain?
Okay. Uh, I call it a Doom suit because it is, yes, it is Doctor Doom because it's Marvel
Okay,
superheroes.
right.
Like strength is Hulk, dexterity is Spider-Man,
Okay.
intellect was Reed Richards, and willpower was Doctor Strange.
Okay.
Those were the five suits. But yes, but
Okay.
it also signifies the Doom. It's
The Doom,
also
yeah,
a
right,
bit like
right.
in the Marvel heroic role playing, which had the Doom pool
Uh-huh. I mean, I
of dice.
haven't played it, but okay.
Okay, they had a Doom pool where the dice in the middle keep getting up when bad stuff started happening.
Uh-huh.
The GM could grab it to make stuff more difficult for the players, or type thing. So it was really, it's like a great mechanic that just ramps up the tension. And
Uh-huh.
also in Marvel, those players were, I had at some point players were like, okay, I have a low card or I have two really good Doom cards, but they know that if they play the Doom card, it'll come back in the end of the session. Okay. Oh, so there.
Nice.
But yeah.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think Steal Your Mind had to run along, and that's fine. So it might just be the two of us. I don't know if we'll have anybody in the chat tonight or not. But
Is there anything that you wanted I do script wise?
I've got it for myself. I'll just handle it solo.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Because I didn't start writing the script until about 8:15. So I just took the existing one and cut Tracy out of it.
Yeah.
So let me hit record on the audio. There we go. And we'll get started. This episode of The Tome Show is brought to you by Skull Splitter Dice, sponsoring a Tome Show listener contest. Be sure to enter and win. Listeners like you, thanks for using the Tome's Amazon and DM's Guild affiliate links, and our wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/The Tome Show. Welcome to the book club for May 2020? Late May? Is that what we're going to call June 9th? Is late May? late May.
Late May.
The Tome is a D&D news, reviews, and interview show, and I'm your Tome host, Jeff Greiner. In each book club episode, we discuss one D&D related book, spoilers be damned, in full book club style. And our book this time around is Dragons of Winter Night by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. In the next episode in July, end of July, we will be revisiting the setting of Dark Sun as we read The Crimson Legion, which is book 2 of the Prism Pintad by Troy Denning. With us, as always, and you may have already heard his dulcet tones, is Eric Paquette. Eric, how you doing?
Doing good.
I mean,
how are you doing?
As good as one could be doing in the middle of a global pandemic and all the other crazy things that are happening in the world in early June, right?
Yes, 2020.
It's
just
crazy.
For all future people, if you have a time machine, do not avoid
So we are discussing Dragons of Winter Night. It is the second book of the Dragonlance Chronicles series, of which there are three books. I mean, there's the three
There are three
original. I
books.
don't know if
Yeah,
Dragons of Winter Flame, which comes way later and after a bunch of other books, counts as being part of the series or not. It has
there
the naming convention.
there is other stuff that's happening that's addition to them.
Right.
Like there's something I probably
And
covered
that's something I want to
early
talk
on.
about. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
so it's the second book of the Dragonlance Chronicles series, which was originally, if I remember my Dragonlance Chronicles lore, these books and adventures for D&D were kind of written simultaneously. By Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman when they were working for TSR in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is where TSR was based at the time.
yeah. Part of the script for the game, from what I gather, their adventures
Right.
of those scenarios were some of the stuff that the Heroes of the Lands did were actually actions that were done. Those which they just interpreted
Right.
to make actually a
Absolutely.
story.
So that's the book we're looking at, and someday we'll continue reading these books. I imagine. I hope because I realized going through this book, and again we'll get into it in more depth in a second. But I realized going into this book, or as I was reading this book, um, that of all the Dragonlance books, I'm pretty sure this is the one I remembered the least from when I read it in my youth. This is the one that stuck with me almost not at all. Um, so, so there's that. But I also wanted to take a break before we got into all of that and mention that it's worth noting for our listeners that the Tome Show has been streaming our live recordings over at twitch.tv/Tome Show for a few months now, and just in the last month or so, it's really gotten quite lively and in a lot of the recordings, and we get a lot of interaction and participation on the stream while we're recording. And you can go ahead and can head over to twitch.tv/Tome Show and follow us to get notified of when we start a stream. Also on Twitter, I always tweet it out right as we're starting and right before we start a stream. So you can always get a notification and come join us and be part of that crowd. If streaming is not your thing, don't worry. You can also catch the raw, unedited video on YouTube, usually a little while later, maybe at most like a week later. And of course, it'll always be edited down and make us actually sound like we're halfway intelligent and turned into a podcast, as it has always been. That's still our bread and butter. But if you want to watch us and look at us make goofy faces and see what it looks like when I'm working too hard to read off of a script while recording, this is how you can do it. I also wanted to note for people's benefit that, as I mentioned in the opening, that we are running a contest right now, sponsored by Skull Splitter Dice. They are providing 4 really fantastic bundles of dice to give away, 1 per month for the next 4 months. So this month, and they're letting me decide sort of how I want to give the bundles away. So this month, I decided to do it via the Tome Show's Twitter. So if you hear this or see this in June, head over to Twitter and find The Tome Show. It is at The Tome Show. On June 1st, I tweeted a message that has both a link to all of the fantastic prizes, including a set of metal dice, a bundle of a collection of dice, one of their newer collections of plastic dice, one of their new dice trays, and one of their nice cases that is really handy for holding, if nothing else, holding your metal dice, which sometimes it's nice not to have rolling around in a bag with plastic dice and getting them all messed up, right? So if you head to June 1st, you'll see the tweet. I've been retweeting it a lot. Like every couple of days, I retweet it just to remind people about it. So you can catch it there too. And you'll also see information about how to enter the contest. If you didn't catch this in time and you're hearing about the contest for the first time, good news. There's still 3 more coming along. We'll be doing one a month through September. And the one that will be going on in July will be based on the Tome Show's Facebook page. So make sure you follow the Tome Show's Facebook page. And on July 1st, I will post information about how to enter that way once I figure out how to do it. So that's all the announcements I wanted to make. Eric, did you want to announce anything?
I have nothing to announce. No.
Okay, that was the Eric sits quietly and listens to me talk part of the show. So
That is, which is fine, which is informative.
good. And hopefully the rest of the show is the Eric teaches me a thing or two about fantasy literature. That's usually what the rest of the show ends up being. So
Okay.
no pressure.
No pressure.
So we read Dragons of Winter Night by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And like I said earlier, like this was of all the Dragonlance books I've read, and by all I mean of the 7 Dragonlance books I've read, this is the one I probably remembered the least. Like I think I only remembered one event from this book when I read it back in my childhood. Going into it, I'm like, is this the one with Lord Soth? No, it is not. You know, is this the one with
Yeah, I think the next one's Lord Soth.
and the next one's also the big war up north in Palanthas, and the next one is where we meet. Is the next one where we meet Dalamar, or is that not until the Legends series?
I believe that's the Legends
series.
series.
I know he's heavily involved in the Legends series, but I wasn't sure if we sort of met him for the first time. And
I suspect that we might maybe hear of Dalamar at the end. I don't remember. It's been a while. Now when we get to it, we will see. But right now it's Dragons Winter Night, which also for me, I was like, okay. I was even wondering if I didn't even read this. Then I got oh wait, I remember this part. So yes.
Exactly. Well, no, exactly right.
Because it's been decades.
I swear the only part I remember, and there were some pretty interesting parts. The only part I remembered was the first dragon orb, the green dragon orb that they get in the Elven. Is it Qualinesti or Sylvanesti? What?
It was a Sylvanesti one. First one.
I kind of get them.
The first one that they referred to was the Sylvanesti one. But yeah. Me, I was remembering about the Silvara situation, about the fact that she was the dragon, and it was in my mind, and so when that I was like, okay, yes, I was right. And then the one that I remind myself, because I said to myself, is this the book that the Tinker Gnomes show up for the first time?
I did remember them. I did remember the Tinker Gnomes. I did, but I didn't remember Silvara. Now, Silvara's situation to me was extremely transparent. Like, it took me about 2 or 3 mentions of Silvara before I'm like, wait a minute, she's a silver dragon. And then it took maybe 2 or 3 more mentions before I'm like, wait a minute, she's Huma's silver dragon. You know, so it wasn't for people who kind of know the larger story. Like I may not remember the book and that reveal, but it was pretty obvious to me that that's what was going on.
Oh, yeah. So, shall we?
Let's
as we usually do a sort of
go through it a little bit. Yeah. So it started off like, okay, so this book is weird to me, not just because I don't remember it from my childhood. And this book is weird because of things that you kind of alluded to earlier and that are evident like on page 1. And that's that this book skips over and doesn't bother to tell you about really important major events.
You're talking about the Hammer of Karas.
Well, that's one instance of it, right? The Hammer of Karas, which I believe, if I remember right, there is a book about. Like they did these spin.
There's
they did these spin-off.
There is a series that I found honestly today because I was like, where did they mention about the Hammer of Karas? Because I was like, I don't remember this at the end of Autumn
Right.
Twilight if they dealt with it. And you start out the book where they have it and they're arriving at the suburban city of Torbaden. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm missing something. And when I look, there is a series called Lost Chronicles, which seems to deal with parts of the Dragonlance Chronicles
Mm-hmm.
that they did not delve on. And one of the book, the Dragons of Dwarven Redeem or something like
Sure.
that, is the book which deals of how the Flint goes and reclaims the
But it's
Hammer
a
of
really
Karas.
important event. Like the finding
Yes,
the Hammer of Karas is what like it was crucial to getting the dwarves on board as allies, it becomes crucial towards the eventual forging of the dragon lances. Like the story doesn't happen without finding this hammer. Like the beginning of like they couldn't have even traveled through the mountains to get to the next part of the story in Dragons of Winter Night without this story, and they just didn't include that like story. They just skipped it. They just said, "Oh yeah, this stuff happened, and now we're over here on the other side of the mountains, and the dwarves are friends now." And
yeah,
the other thing like that also think there was one of the spin-off books from maybe the same series was the blacksmith losing his arm and getting the silver arm, and not
yeah.
only do they don't even kind of summarize the
Well,
story in this book. Like in at least with the Hammer of Karas, they kind of summarized it. Yeah, there was that thing. There were walrus men, and then we got the hammer. It was great for the dwarves. Here's how it affected things or whatever. But the blacksmith, whose name eludes me at the moment, yeah.
Terrace
So
Ehrenfeld.
yeah, so and he just sort of shows up and has a silver arm and like, hey, wait, what happened to your arm? It's like, don't worry about it. I'll tell you about it later. Like, and that's
Well,
that's all we get.
from what I recall, in Dragons of Autumn Twilight, he had lost. He was one arm at that point in time because he
That's
was tortured by the
yes, I think
Draconians.
that's right.
Oh, so yeah, there is a. I believe there is a book that deals with how he
Right.
gained the artifact, which is the iron hose, which is needed to be forged to forge so yeah, the two important
Right.
items to forge the dragon lances, the hammer of Karas and the silver arm of Ironfeld.
Right.
Both of
They just sort of
those,
show up as a Deus Ex Machina without any explanation, right?
yeah,
And the other
yeah,
one and we've already alluded to them finding one dragon orb. The other one was the other one that drove me crazy. Because it was like, well, you're going to go over here and look for a dragon orb. We're going to go over there for look for a dragon orb. We get a really in-depth story about the finding of the one dragon orb, and then for the other one, it's like, oh no, we found it, and we just skipped that whole part where we found the dragon orb. It's like, why couldn't you be
yeah.
telling us that story too? The dragon orb is like if I was running a D&D game and just skipped the part where the heroes found a major artifact and just said, "Oh, you've got this artifact by the way. You found it during the time jump that we just had." Like
Oh,
that would drive people crazy.
I I have read the Dragonlance modules
Yeah.
recently. So also I've read the series, and the way that they handle it in the modules is that at certain key points, each module, the group separates, and you have here are the characters you're playing for this scenario, and then so you do go and do. But if you are playing Tassahalf, all that you might, and you're playing this campaign, at one point you might go, oh, scenario. Well, Tassahalf is not playing in this
Right.
scenario. Here are other characters. So you have to if you're playing,
You have
you
to
have to
switch
switch
characters, and
characters
that's
and
why
all that.
you kind of
Which
end up with extra people being added to both when they split. Other people
yes,
are added, I guess, so they can have a whole party, and the
yeah,
people who played Tasselhoff but they're not telling Tasselhoff's story can still have something to do. Interesting.
yeah. Well, because it really tells the story of this huge War of the Lands, which is really epic, and those characters is too much for just a few characters to do. You have to increase the ensemble, and they have to split up
Mm.
to be able to do all the things. Otherwise, it would be too much for characters just by themselves from a story perspective to be able to do.
Yeah,
But
yeah. No,
which is
it's It's
which, as
interesting.
we see in this book.
Yeah, I didn't remember that happening this much in this book, and I guess I kind of forgive it a little bit because I know they've gone back and filled in those gaps. I know those stories are there, um, and maybe I give it a little bit more leeway because it's D and that has a special place in my heart, right? But this is the exact kind of stuff that Le Guin was doing in the Earthsea book that we read, just skipping over major points and getting to the events that she wanted to talk about, right? And that's the exact reason that like I completely lost interest in that story and didn't really care about it, you know. But this didn't have that effect on me, but maybe because I've already read it once and I kind of know the important parts and what's going on. So
Yeah, but yeah, so that important part at the end, like, yeah, and so they are at Park at Torba, then they get past and they uh, get to Tarsus, which is supposed to be a port city.
mm.
They're following the old map that Tasselhoff
Right.
has.
But the map is pre-cataclysm, and the
Yeah,
sea has moved, and Tarsus is no longer a port city. Like I like that.
yeah,
Like they describe the boats are still in there in the harbor, but the land just sort of keeps going on past them. They're all grounded, and so how does this once flourishing port city, how is it surviving and how is it getting by now when the thing that made the city functional is no longer there, right? And it's barely
yeah,
scraping by, and they've developed a deep entrenched hatred of some of their former allies, like the Knights of Solamnia, and they're not real fond of the elves as well, um, which is unfortunate, right? Because they find themselves in a situation where allies could be really helpful.
yes. Allies could be very helpful to be able to rebuild this town, but they are not trusting any allies, and thus
Right.
they are left with this ramshackle town that just barely surviving.
Hmm.
But yeah,
And then you get, and then
which
they get there to the town. They discover that the city has been basically taken over by the dragon armies, and they've effectively put themselves behind enemy lines because the blue dragon army was like coming in to reinforce or whatever behind them.
yeah,
Um,
that they meet up with Alana, these Sylvanas the Princess, Alana
mhm.
Starbreeze, and a group of knights of some yeah,
who feel almost like side characters and incidental. Both was it Alana? Is that her name?
yeah,
Yeah,
Alana,
both her felt sort of like a side character and incidental, and the knights felt kind of
yeah,
incidental when they were introduced. Like they're going to be like, here's a cameo. They're going to be NPCs for a while and they'll go away. But those knights end up being really crucial to Storm's story. And then again, I suppose
yes,
so does Alana Starbreeze, right?
yep,
Um, like that relationship was weird too. Like that seemed to come out of the
Alana's,
Alana and Sturm relationship. Sort of
yeah,
just came out of nowhere. I didn't
yeah.
feel it.
It sort of came out of nowhere. It seems like a crush or attraction, but not really. But they seem to be sort of personality wise, seem to be like find themselves to be
Mhm.
kindred spirits.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely.
So
They're a little bit. It's really the authors, at least in that part of the story, making an argument for love at first sight, but at the same time trying to do a star-crossed lover Romeo and Juliet kind of romance, which
yeah,
felt weird to me through the whole thing. Like I'm supposed to really care about this relationship that was never really thoroughly explored or established.
no, I mean it was just presented, and there, I, I was seeing that what they were doing, but I was not feeling the establishment of
Mm-hmm.
okay, yeah, they will be together and all that. So it was not a driving force towards learning stories. Like it was a side thing that was happening. The For Storm Story, the plot with the Knights of Solomon and his struggles between the oath and the measure and balancing those out, that was the much more compelling
Yeah,
to
I
me
agree.
story.
Yeah, and that's
Story.
skipping ahead a little bit, but yes, I found
Yeah,
that conversation, that debate, that struggle, that tension
yeah,
that would about Sturm becoming a full fledged knight and the politics around it and all of that to be much more compelling, and that dealt with the, I would argue, much more incidental characters of the Knights of Salamia that were sort of undercover, hiding out in Tarsus, right?
yeah, yeah.
So getting
But
back to
but that introduced those characters so that way we
yeah,
know they're they're not just thrown in at the end when they are you really get in the thick
right.
of it. So
Um, although
uh,
although the vitriol that the one knight has for Sturm seemed seemed like it got like it's the relationship pieces with Sturm that got short shrift to me. Like I never really felt the love between him and Alana in the same way I never really felt the vitriol and hatred and why it existed between Sturm and, was it Lord Derek?
yeah, Derek
Yeah.
Groundguard.
Like clearly that guy just really didn't like Sturm and was willing to do anything to sink the guy. But like
Yeah,
it was predicated on, well, this one time I told him to do a thing and he didn't exactly follow orders.
yeah. Well, I always gathered that Derek Groundguard's vile towards Sturm was not towards really Sturm, but what he represents.
Maybe. Uh,
And that's my angle. I was
yeah.
looking at it, and I was like, okay,
Well, I mean,
it was if it was another Knight of Salonia who did the same thing, it didn't matter it was Sturm, just same circumstance, as much. He wanted to get more control, more power, and that and Sturm was not really giving it to him. That was where it was.
you're getting real choppy there. Uh, I caught some of that message, uh, but you're
Okay.
getting a little choppy. But yeah, no, I think you're right, and where I think you were going with that, even if I didn't hear it, that Sturm represented an approach to things, a way of doing things, and that connected to the current leader of the Knights, or the current presumed leader of the Knights, and that is the impetus behind a lot of that tension between Derek and Sturm, and that Sturm was just a convenient way for Derek to take jabs at the current leader, whose name escapes me. Um, and so I get that, and maybe there's a backstory with Sturm's dad because he was a well known knight, although Sturm never knew him, and so maybe he represented more than that. But man, this guy was willing to sink a guy's life goals, predicated on the this one guy didn't follow my orders exactly one time, so I'm just going to completely sink his career, right?
Usually, it will become a huge legal battle.
Yeah, you are still just real choppy there. I can see your video
Okay.
jumping, but you're not even the video is not smooth. I was hoping it would smooth out. OBS tells me the stream is strong, and my signal's going okay, so I think it's on your end, but hopefully sometimes these things clear up on their own after a while. So if somebody's watching right now, I'm just vamping for time a little bit to see if Eric's connection smooths out.
You're still
Yeah,
on Twitch.
we're still on Twitch, and the stream is going okay, but you're still choppy and jumping around and hard to understand.
Okay. Strange. my sense to you.
I don't know if there's anything I can do in the settings to make the call smoother. No, I don't see anything. The entire world is using video chat software a lot these days. So
Yeah, testing. And like Skype and everything's fine.
it's still real. I catch a syllable here and there.
Okay.
Do we want to hang up and start the call again and see if that fixes it?
Let's try that.
Okay. So for those of you in the stream, I think you'll still be able to see me. While I try recalling Eric and see if that fixes his situation. And now it doesn't even... Okay, let's try this again.
Did that work?
You're much smoother now.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that did,
Well, that's
that
good.
did the trick, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So sorry about that, folks. Either watching this later or in the live chat. You see that there's a few of you there. So we were talking about Sturm and Derek and that other the leader of the Knights that whose name
Yes.
escapes me, but you're good with names. Do you remember it?
I don't remember the names, and I'm actually looking
Okay.
up. See, Lord
That
Guntar.
sounds reasonable. But yeah, so Sturm ends up with this situation with Alana Starbreeze, who is the princess of the
Sylvanesti.
Sylvanesti, which is
Yeah.
the it's the Sun Elves. In my head, I make the D&D connection, right? It's the High Elves or the Sun Elves, as opposed to the Wood Elves, which are the Qualinesti.
Yeah, but there's three types of
Well,
elves.
yeah,
There's the
and then
Qualis,
there's the mechanically
the
what
wild
what would
elves.
be the Wild Elves, the Kaganesti,
Yeah. Yeah.
who are a type like that was a whole bit of lore that I didn't remember from reading this as a kid at all. The Kaganesti and all that. Like I remember kind of hearing the name, but I think I remember it more from the game books than I do the novels.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've barely gotten into we keep jumping around in the story, which I think is fine. We're exploring themes as we go, but they end up behind enemy lines in Tarsus. The Blue Dragon Army comes in behind them. There's an attack. They get separated, but they kind of have a plan because Tasselhoff found the Knights, or the Knights found him when everybody was being escorted off to meet the local lord or what have you, when they found out that the Draconians were there. And Tass met the Knights and discovered that these really important magical glasses that he found that hadn't been mentioned until now helped him translate.
He's a Kender. I mean, stuff just land in his pockets.
I'm just saying, if somebody else was writing the book, they would have like made mention of the story of Taz going through the dwarven stronghold and seeing these glasses and sticking them in his pocket, and then you not and fine, don't talk about them, ignore them, whatever, and bring them up later. But there would have been mention. There would have been a hint that it was happening, instead of just Deus Ex Machinaing it later. But he discovers he can read this ancient book that the Knights were trying to decipher that tells of the dragon orbs and tells of their location, at least at the time that this book was written ages ago. It's so old that even like you can only look at a page once, and by turning the page you destroy it, and then you have to look at the next one. So
that old, like.
And so Taz has to sort of translate everything that he's seeing as they go. Why they didn't just take the glasses from him and read it themselves, I don't know, but they didn't. Uh, so they
Yeah.
discover they
And,
discover the location of some dragon orbs, and so they figured that was the plan. They got separated. I guess they didn't even necessarily know that they were separated. For all they knew, some of them were dead. Um,
well,
okay.
sort of beforehand. Well, I mean, yeah, the UN attack was still, but there was also talk about it because of Raceland and Sturm were still having tensions between them, and they were talking about the need to separate to go deal. Like Raceland can go and get the deal with find those dragon
Hmm.
orbs, while Sturm can go up north to uh, Sancrest. Yes,
Yeah.
Sancrest for purposes of going to help with the Knights of Solamnia.
Right.
So,
And so anyway, they end up getting split up when the inn that they were in was destroyed by Dragon Breath. The Red
yeah.
Dragon Inn, which is a fairly well used name in the gaming community, right? I believe there's a game called Red Dragon Inn. It's not a Dragonlance game, but I imagine that's where the name came from. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well, Red Dragons are synonymous with
right,
D&D, so
and so was it Karaman, Raceland, Tanis, um, Alana, and the other elf guy, Lorana's
uh,
brother. Wasn't he with
uh,
them?
no. The group was Tanis, Riverwind,
Oh, Riverwind
Goldmoon,
and Goldmoon.
Caramon, Racing, Tika, and Alhana.
Yes,
And the other group was Sturm, Flint, Tassahalf, Gilcanis, which is Lorna's
Gelthianis.
brother,
That's what I was thinking of.
Lorana, and Illiston.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Those was the
That was
split
the
of the
split, and
groups.
so we mostly end up following the story of Tanis and company as they go to the elven home, the Sylvanesti lands and the city, where we learn the story that the city was evacuated by the king, and the king had one sort of last ditch effort to try to save his people, and that was, it turned out that was to use a dragon orb to keep the dragon armies away or at bay or whatever.
Yeah.
But the dragon orb basically won the contest of wills, and so
Yeah.
he was working for the dragon orb. The dragon orb was not working for him, and so it was like this haunted land, and it was full of visions of things that weren't really there. And so there was this psychological thing of getting through the city, and then eventually you get to the actual king. And there's visions of the other characters, and they all have like dreams of being there too, and it was kind of weird.
Well, but also it was being manipulated by the Green Dragon Cyan
Yeah,
Bloodbane.
yeah. That's right. Because the Dragon Orb
Who's a
called Cyan Bloodbane, and then Cyan basically it was Cyan and the Dragon Orb were basically running things,
yeah,
and the king was the vessel with which the Dragon Orb was able to act.
yeah,
Uh,
and they basically reading the book that saying it sort of looks sometimes that like as you until you realize what's happening, it's sort of like wait the group is back all together because
right.
Sturm is there and all the other
Well,
people are there.
and that's where the previous parts of the story are extra frustrating because the story has been known to just skip over major events. And so the idea that like the group would be back together again and all in Sylvanesti together, like that's reasonable the way the story's being
Yeah,
told because they've skipped over
yeah,
really big important things like, oh, we got separated but now we're back together again or whatever, but it turns out it wasn't. It was
yeah.
just part of the visions from the
Since
dragon orb and what have you.
the
And
dream. Yeah.
eventually um, I forget how they defeated or got past Cyan Bloodbane. Do you remember?
I I do not remember how they defeated those. I do remember though that like in the dreams, I think it was only in the dreams, but in the dreams, Racelands take on the black robes and he's
Yeah.
going. Yeah, they try to get to the Tower Stars. I think it is. Raistlin using dominating the dragon orb and putting his will on it, showing as well. That's my gut that I'm thinking, but honestly, I don't remember
Um,
for that.
yeah, no, and it was like I guess we don't really know how Cyan was defeated. But we know he was defeated. Because it all sort of happened in this weird was it a dream, was it not a dream thing. And the whole
Yeah,
Raceland and the Black Robes thing um, is possible to be happening if we know what's coming down the line for Raceland,
yeah,
right? Um, so it's possible Raceland did defeat him at this point, and if it was really Raceland or what have you. But eventually,
yeah,
Raceland, the dragon is defeated, and Raceland basically goes up and is able to sort of master the dragon orb well enough to stick it in a bag of holding that they apparently have, um, and carry the thing away, right? Um,
yeah.
so yeah, so that was a thing, and then
So that, yeah,
and I think it's at that point that a lot of the focus switches back over to the other crew,
yeah.
and it's like
Where
who
basically they're traveling up the
who already has a dragon
yeah they're
orb,
traveling up.
right?
Right?
And they already have a dragon orb. Yeah,
Yes, they're up in the glacier and they recovered a they they kill a white dragon and recovered a second dragon orb.
right.
So
So we got the story of one group gathering a dragon orb. Then it switches to the other group, and the other group's like, "Yep, we already got one. We're good." And it
yeah,
becomes all about the travel and taking this dragon orb. Was it Sandcrest where they were taking it, or Whitestone?
yes,
Eventually, okay,
Sancrest.
they're taking it to Sandcrest now. Eventually, it gets to Whitestone.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so they
Uh,
get it to, or okay, so yeah, and then they split the party again, don't they? Because they're being followed, they're being chased by the elves who want the dragon orb,
yeah,
and some of them are like, well, we'll stay here and go this way and draw the elves away from you, and you go that way and get the orb to Sandcrest. And then the story follows the ones that are leading the elves away, right? And then it becomes the story of Lorana and Gilthanas is there, and Silvara
yeah.
and Taz. Is that the whole group?
Yes, I believe that's the whole group.
Um,
I don't quite remember
yeah.
who.
Well,
But yes,
and oh no, not yet. Yeah, and so anyway, Silvara takes them to this really iconic looking location, right? It's massive
yeah,
dragon carved into the side of a cliff, and there's a waterfall, and there's mist, and
yeah.
there's a tomb inside
Because
of it.
this is the part where they meet up with Silvara the first time.
Oh, is it? I thought well, because
She was
they met Silvara back
she
at
wasn't there
they
beforehand.
met Silvara. Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. So they met Silvara going through the Elven lands, and then they sort of ditched the elves and took the dragon orb with them, and
Yeah,
that's when the elves were chasing them. And she
yeah,
was a Kaganesti elf working as sort of like a servant to the elves. Um,
yeah. So
yes,
Nasty being into the White
yes,
Elves. So
absolutely, that's right. And so she joins up with them because they were nice to her, and then she takes them to the big, waterfall and big giant dragon statue and whatever. And it's revealed that, unsurprisingly to anybody paying attention, that she is the silver dragon that once was ridden by the great knight Huma himself, right? Um, and that this great dragon statue thing that she took them to is currently serving as the tomb of Huma. That Huma is actually there. Um, and although I did enjoy the fact that like they talked about this is the tomb of Huma, but the statue, the carving, and all of that looks much older than the tomb of Huma. Like this thing is older than Huma is, but they've
yeah,
repurposed some ancient impressive site and made it into Huma's tomb.
it's a generational tomb.
Sure,
They
yeah.
happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Like big mausoleum. Like, it's like uh, but also when there, that's where where one of the characters that had been killed off in the first book comes
Right.
back. Fizban.
Yeah, so yeah, Taz ends up well, and it was a little strange. Like everybody was it Silvara like betrays them or something. She basically defeats them with a sleep spell, doesn't she?
Uh,
Something puts them all to sleep.
yeah.
Um, and I thought it was her, but I don't. That part was a little fuzzy anyway. But Taz was unaffected because Taz is, I guess, afraid of nothing and so can't be put to sleep. I don't
Yeah.
know. And ends up jumping into this big hole behind the tomb, and this hole like turns into a sort of an air-based water slide, right? It just sort of zips you around through these tunnels until he comes out in this higher chamber up in the head of the dragon statue, and he's checking out some of the murals and carvings there, and somebody starts talking to him, and it's Fizban who died in the last book.
But
And then Fizban joins him back down the tunnel, back into the tomb, and basically chastises Silvara. Like, Fizban clearly knows Silvara, clearly knows what's going on, knows a lot about her and her situation, and chastises her, as which is our first real hint that there is a lot more going on to Fizban than meets the eye, right?
yeah.
He
Well,
he is not just a
in
weird,
that,
eccentric, and powerful wizard. Like there's something
yeah.
else there.
Well, it shows that he knows more of what's going on, and uh, when she reveals that she's a silver dragon, I think that's also the sort of where they reveal, from what I recall, basically because the good dragons which exist in the world, because this is their first indications
Right.
of, look, they're phones, but they can't interfere, they can't do anything because of the pact that they have, a pact that they had established with the chromatic
Mm.
dragons. I don't think they go much into detail about what that pack is. I think that's in the second, and then the third book.
Maybe.
So
Yeah, but Fizban clearly knows all about this pact and is
yeah,
talking to her about you made a deal. Are
yeah,
you are
yeah,
you breaking this deal? Like he's like, I'm not going to stop you from breaking your word, but recognize that there are consequences to that, and make sure you're okay with that, right?
yeah.
Um, that I forgot. That's also where they ran into Theros, the
Yes,
blacksmith, and he's with them as well with his silver arm. And that becomes
yeah,
important because that's when they sort of stick around there for a while and make dragon lances, right?
yeah.
And then the rest of then it cuts over to the knights, and they get they get the orb to Sandcrest, and then they go to Whitestone with it.
Yeah. They go to San Chris, which is where the big political drama happens between Derek and
What is
Sturm.
the Whitestone thing? Keep thinking of then.
Whitestone was the
Oh, it's the
council.
Council of Whitestone at Sandcrest. Is that right?
Uh,
Okay.
yes,
So the
yes.
Council of Whitestone is at Sandcrest, and they have there's a
San
big
Chris.
political drama, and it turns out, after the courtroom scene, Sturm is not going to be allowed to wear the regalia of a knight. He's not going to be officially made a knight, kind of. Like there was he
Well,
wasn't being given the honors of the knight, but he wasn't being denied his knighthood either, and
he's allowed to become a full knight of Somalia in the Order of the Crown, which not of the Rose, which I believe the Rose is the highest
that's
of the
um, what
oops.
were it's the sword, the crown, and the rose. I think in that order.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's allowed to stay a night, and then they ship him off to go fight in the war up north, right? And they're going to put him in charge of one of the branches of knights. So even though he's not, allowed to wear the regalia, and he doesn't know the fate of whether or not he's going to be allowed to stay a knight or not, and they're going to, wait till there's some witnesses they can question and whatever. He's going to be in charge. He's going to be in charge of a third of the army. And then he leaves, and right on his coattails, here comes the rest of the group. Right? They show up with dragon lances, and Laurana is there. And even though she's not a knight, she's a princess, and they give her some credence, and they decide, okay, great, he's allowed to become a knight. We get our scene with Fizban and Tass in Mount Nevermind, which is the name of the Tinker Gnome city inside the mountain. Which that is the other part of this story that I remember well from my childhood. The gnomes are funny and fun and interesting.
Yes. And it's part of their culture. They're used to be interrupted because they will run on and just talk.
Well, and because, not just talk, but because their names could take a day to say, right? And so that's why it got started getting called Mount Nevermind by the knights, because the gnomes would say, "Oh, we live over here in Mount blah 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 blah," and eventually the knights would just go, "Never mind, never mind, never mind. You don't need to tell me," and it just became colloquially known as Mount Nevermind. And it is, and so you get all that. There's the Council of Whitestone where they're deciding what to do, and one of the things they're deciding what to do is what to do with the dragon orb that they brought with them. And
that's where there's lots of conflict.
Yeah.
It's like the Council of Rivendell and
kind of
Lord of the Rings, where they're basically all the races are all fighting each other of what to do until
we should use the orb. We should hide the orb. We should lock it away. We should get it. Whatever, right?
And Tass just grabs it and just throws it out and just shatters
Although
it.
it was foreshadowed. Like Fizban had told him, like, you're going to have a choice to make, and one of the choices is going to be easy and ultimately lead to ruin. And one of the choices is going to be really hard for you specifically, and it will make life harder for everybody, but is probably the better choice in the long run, right? And
there will be losses on your personal losses and personal sacrifices on your end.
So Taz made the sacrifice of making life difficult, but to do the right thing, which was destroy the orb, which also feels a little weird to me, I guess. Like Fizban was angling that we should totally destroy this dragon orb, knowing full well that Raceland's walking around with another one like it's no big deal.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you got rid of one, but
this man is a big, huge manipulator in this thing. He's like,
well, and he has been since chapter 1 of the first book, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so
in the scenario adventures, he's the NPC that prods the heroes in one direction or the other and forces them to act and not to stall.
Right. Well, and even in chapter 1, for those of us who know more about Fizban's story, and it's kind of hard not to talk about it. I'm looking forward to the next book because I think that's when we can talk about it, right?
Yes.
But even in chapter 1 of the first book, like, not only is he asking for a song that sets everything off, right, and putting everything in motion, but like there's a description of him showing up before the heroes ever show up and arranging the furniture in a certain way to make sure that things he clearly knows how things are going to play out and how to manipulate that, even from that beginning part.
I mean, and like from when he was speaking to Silvara about her breaking and all that, and I was reading it as it's like Fizban wants her to break her stuff. He's chastising her, but you read it and he wants her to do stuff. He wants her to get involved in this, even though she shouldn't because of promises that she's made. But he wants to because I feel like he doesn't like where stuff is going or where he believes stuff is
Right.
going, and he, I believe, I, I believe, I also know, but I believe that he he is also breaking rules that he's not
Right.
supposed to knowingly by being there, but he's trying to do it without being obvious
Right.
about
So, in the interest of time, then that crew is tasked with heading off to the High Claris Tower where Sturm is, and
it.
joining them and
Yeah,
working on the fight there in the north.
yeah,
And then we cut back over to, is it Flotsam? Is that the name of the town?
yeah. Floats up.
With the other group, the Tanis and Raceland and Karaman and Tika and all them, they've been sort of working their way to this town of Flotsam, working as a traveling performance team. Like Raceland starts doing magic tricks and they start singing songs and doing things to make a little bit of money here and there. On their way to Flotsam, they discover that Flotsam is overrun by the dragon armies as well.
Yeah, the Blue
The
Dragon
Blue
Army.
Dragon Army, which is the same one that they ran into down at in Tarsus, wasn't it? The of the second army that showed up, it was the Blue Dragon
Yeah,
Army.
I think so. I thought though the our Dragon Army in Tarsus was a red one.
So I know that I believe there was one Dragon Army that was already there, and then there was the other
Yeah,
one that came in behind when the
yeah,
attack happened, and I think that was the blue because I remember there was one section where they were being told telling the story from the perspective of Sky, which is the Dragon High Lord of the
yes,
Blue Dragon Army's dragon.
yeah.
And it's actually in Flotsam where we meet the Blue Dragon High Lord. The heroes are able to get a handle on some of the Dragon Army uniforms and are
Yeah.
posing as members of the Dragon Army, and Tanis is being attacked, and the Dragon High Lord comes to his defense, and it turns out it's Kitiara,
His old
his
flame.
old
Yeah, his old
his
flame.
old love. He has the elven love and he has the human love, and this is the human love who we've heard about since the first book, who'd gone off north to make her way with her sword, and now she's there.
And yeah, and now we find out why she did not make the
Right?
appointment
Why she didn't join
that
everybody
they had
else
promised
at the end of the last home like everybody else, right? She had become
because she got a job as a general now of the evil
right.
army. I mean, as one does.
And she sees Tanis in the Dragon Army uniform is like, oh, how did I not know that one of my good friends from my past is one of my lieutenants? And she totally buys into it, right? And takes him
Yeah, she
along
does.
and tells him all of their secret. Well, not all of their secrets, but tells them a bit about what's going on. We get some exposition there, and then
And he goes along with it.
right,
Tennis goes along. He's not letting go. He's just continuing on. He's by himself with her.
and is that where we leave that storyline off? I'm trying to remember. Or did they get on a boat and take off on the boat?
Well, she, she gives him a captain position, I believe, or
Mm.
something like that. Where you roll all that. It's not the last part where she is because she is.
It's not the last part for
Uh,
her, but is it the last part for him?
I believe it
Yeah.
is the last part, but we do hear of her at the end
Yeah.
because where she mentions. But
Yeah, no, we'll
yeah,
get but I'm trying to remember.
well,
I'm
we'll
trying to
get to that.
remember if they ended the Tanis and group scene with them getting on a boat, or if it was a boat that brought them to Flotsam. There was a boat trip at some point, and it was
Yeah,
notable because it involved the Green Gemstone Man. Is it Barum?
the
Is that his name?
Green Emerald Man,
Yeah.
which we do learn that Kitiara is also looking
Well,
for him.
and well, they kind of the dragon armies have been looking for him since book one. That's another one
Yeah,
of those stories. It's like they make this guy out to be really important. Everybody's looking for him, but he like makes little brief cameos in the books. Like I want to know, they're like, what is this story? What's going on? I guess maybe we'll find out.
yeah, no, because that is the Green Gemstone Man is one person that one character that I do not remember at
Oh
all
yeah.
in the
And I
story.
don't remember his story being like super crucial in future events, other than I remember even as a kid reading it, like that it bothered me, like they act like this guy is really important, but he was never made to feel important to me as a reader at all. I never understood that whole thing, but we'll find out if we feel the same at the end of the next book.
Yeah.
So that's more or less the end of that story. Then we go to the High Claris Tower. Laurana and everybody shows up. The political drama with the knights continues, but Sturm is made a full knight. Lord Derek insists that... so they're there in the High Claris Tower. The High Claris Tower has never fallen so long as a man of was it faith has defended it. And...
I mean, Sturm is made knight, and he's sent to defend the High Claris Tower underneath the rule of Derek.
My impression was that because there was one representative there from each of the three types of knights.
Knight of the Rose.
And so I don't think Derek. He was technically under Derek. They were in a council together in charge of their sections. Yeah. But Derek was always able to get the other guy to go along with him. Even though Sturm was like, the other guy doesn't really seem to be into it, but he always follows Derek's instructions.
Yeah. The Order of the Rose is the most prestigious, the leaders and all that. So when you're saying,
right,
they are in D&D rules, in the Dragon Rules, if you wanted to be a Knight of Solamnia, you had to, the Order of the Rose was the higher level.
Absolutely. No, and Lord Derek's position, like in the knighthood, is above him, but in terms of the command of the army, I felt like there was discussion that it was kind of a three-way leadership situation, and Sturm was 1/3 of it. But Lord Derek decides we should charge out of the High Claris Tower and attack the dragon army that has surrounded us. And we should do it now before they starve us out or whatever. And Sturm was very insistent, like, no, this is an incredibly defensible position. It's never fallen. So long as people have stayed here to defend it, we can win this if we just stay put. And Lord Derek is the other guy on his side and insists that they charge out. And Sturm gives his inspirational speech and convinces a bunch of people to stay behind with him. They charge out. The army is massacred. Lord Derek's... the other leader's head is returned, and Lord Derek is returned injured and gone completely mad. He'd obviously been going a little bit crazy before this too, but he's completely insane and whatever. Now Sturm is in charge of the remnants, and he's going to hold the High Claris Tower, and they use the fun little trick. Tass shows up, and they dig in deeper, and they find, of course, a third dragon orb, right? Because why not? Because it was really important that he destroy that one, even though they're tripping over him everywhere they go. So they find another dragon orb, but it's clearly...
They do mention there's only 5 dragon orbs that were made.
Well, and I don't... It hasn't necessarily been made clear in the books, but my impression... And I'd have to go back and look at the stats to see if it's still true. But my impression at the time was that there was one for each dragon color, for each of the chromatic dragon colors.
So they destroyed one.
Right.
And they found 2 others.
Which they found on a glacier, so I guess I'm going to assume is the white dragon orb that they destroyed.
The white dragon one. The one that
which is the least powerful, right? The white dragon one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raistlin's got the green.
So they destroyed the white one. Raistlin, probably has a green.
And then this would be the blue because it called all the blue dragons.
Yeah.
And the High Claris Tower was set up in a very creative way. They used the dragon orb to call the dragons, but there's like grates that the dragons can only fit their heads through and not the rest of their body, and then you off with their head and finish off the dragons because they're stuck, right?
This is also the point where Theros shows up, I believe,
Kitiara?
with the dragon lances.
Theros shows up with Laurana and Taz and those folks with the dragon lances that the other knights besides Sturm don't even want to use Flint
Yeah.
is there, and oh, there was somebody else that had to stay behind to teach them how to use the dragon lances. Was that the excuse for Lorana to stick behind it? I remember, maybe.
I think
And I think by
so.
this point they lost Gelthinus somewhere. Maybe he stayed behind with the elves.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, the battle, then the dragon army comes on. Kitiara shows up and joins the blue dragon army, having received word that this battle was happening. She gets on her dragon and flies there. That's when the dragon orb thing happens, because the dragons show up and it turns the tide of the battle, and then they use the dragon orb and it turns the tide kind of back a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
then Kitiara shows up, and there is the climactic big fight between Sturm and Kitiara on the walls of the High Clearest Tower. And in that moment of sadness, right, Sturm is killed by his old friend
Yeah.
Kitiara, who then hops
Yeah.
back on her dragon and flies away and leaves the rest of them there.
Yeah. Well, basically, Lorana shows up
Right.
to cradle Sturm, and also before leaving, Kiara, who knows also Lorana because
Right.
of the relationship. Well, she mentioned that Tannis is with her, or
Oh, yeah,
she
yeah.
doesn't know that.
Yeah, she mentions
Does
that Tannis is with her army, which is interesting as well. Like, certainly Lorana knows of Kitiara. I don't think they'd actually met before, right?
no.
Because in the first book, she
That-
kept referring to him, Kitiara, as your human love or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't get the impression they knew each other before then, but now they've met each other, right? So yeah, and I think that was more or less where the book left off. I expect that when we pick up the third book eventually, 6 months will have passed and they'll have found 5 more artifacts. Does that sound about right?
Five? Yeah, sounds about right.
There's at least 2 more dragon orbs that they gotta play marbles with, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I'm curious if we're going. Yeah, because honestly, the first book also starts with stuff has happened previously, and we're just getting
well,
into the story.
and that one, I guess it, the first book feels like at least like it's maybe starts in a weird place, but it's telling a continuous story. I didn't feel like there was a
Story,
lot of
yeah.
like it didn't jump in the middle of the story, whereas this one there's a huge jump going from book 1 into book 2. Like, okay, so we didn't get the prequel stuff. Like, I don't mind the story starting a little bit in media res, right? It's not really an in media res start, but it kind of is because the group had already formed. They've
Yeah.
been apart for a few years. That's for a prequel, and I happen to know that there are prequels, right? But then
Yeah.
when you go from book 1 to book 2, and it's like, well, a few months have passed, and we've got new allies, and here's a couple of artifacts, and, on our way.
Yeah.
Um,
Finally decided a place of where to put in their refugees.
I
It's
mean,
been us for several
the
months.
elves of Qualinesti had like completely relocated to another part of the world and resettled like in this amount of time. And we
Yep.
just sort of get told, oh yeah, this happened, and then we move on. So it's interesting. I don't know that it's a style of storytelling that I prefer. I also recognize that if they had told all of those stories, the series would have been 5 books instead of 3 at least. I think they could have told it shorter than they did with the books that they wrote to fill in those gaps, but it would have definitely expanded the story, and
Yeah.
maybe that would have been fine. I don't know.
And I don't mind not having seen of how they got the white dragon orb, all that, because we saw how they got the green one. Now, okay, we get to see we get to see the journey with the dragon orb with the Driven group, while we don't see the journey with the green dragon orb.
Well, thing is, we didn't see the journey with the green dragon orb, but not much happened. They, they just sort of walked.
Oh yeah,
I feel like there were.
but yeah, that's the thing. Those are the two. You flip flop between the
Right.
two characters telling them experience
But I feel like-
stories, because you still want to see those characters rather than just lots
I
and
feel
lots
like
of stuff.
getting a dragon orb should be a big deal, should be difficult, if I'm the DM telling that story, and is worth putting on camera. Right, traveling we can fast forward through. Now their travel with the White Dragon Orb was eventful. There was a lot of important things going on, and so I know why we didn't skip that. I think they missed an opportunity. They could have done an interesting storytelling of going back and forth between both perspectives of both groups and watching them both collect Dragon Orbs different ways at the same time. I think that would have been an interesting way to do that, but they didn't, and there we are. Who am I to tell people how to write? I certainly have never written a novel, so there we go.
I have not either, but we just read lots and lots.
We've
of
read
novels,
a lot of novels,
and we've seen different stuff.
Absolutely. All right, so I think that's where we're done now, right?
Yeah, well, that's the whole story.
Even with two of us, we've gone over time. So.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of stuff that happens, and so like the battle at the end, that's where you actually start feeling that it is. Yes, this is a war. This is not just.
Well,
this is not like the first book. It's you're not really involved in the war. Now it feels like you're involved in this war that is happening.
The first book is kind of like, we live in a world that's somewhat close to the war, so it affects us, but we're not really in the thick of it, right? And then by the end of it, we're kind of at the edges of it. This book, we spend almost the entire book at the edges of this war. And it concludes with, now we're kind of in the middle of it. And as I recall, the third book, it's going to be, now we're in the middle of this war, right? And so we kind of, it's not a direct line of going from outside of the war to the middle of the war, because it kind of spirals around and moves around the continent, but they're kind of zooming in on the heart of the war, and they're getting there, right?
The heart of the So, and this was written in a time of AD&D First Edition, which it's probably now they're currently level-wise, they're probably around level 9, which is when you start having your followers, you have your armies and all that, and that's when you deal with the teens, deal with those big wars.
All right, so I think we're gonna save the discussion for the rest of that for the third book when we get to the third book. And I'm gonna call that the end of the episode. So it's time to say goodbye. I want to say thank you to Skull Splitter Dice for sponsoring our contest for the next few months. If you go to skullsplitterdice.com/tome-show, and I finally looked it up. I've gotten it wrong like the last 3 recordings, but it's skullsplitterdice.com/tome-show. You can find a coupon code there that is worth 15% off if you want to get any awesome dice. Their metal dice are I got them right next to me, are my favorite metal dice. So we've had different dice sponsors over the years. They got the little Skull Splitter logo there on the 20. Cool. But they're also just a little bit bigger than the other dice. So I like that as well. They're easy to grab out of a pile. So anyway, go there, get a 15% discount, get yourself some awesome dice. I also want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/thetomeshow. And those of you who shop at Amazon and DM's Guild using our affiliate links at thetomeshow.com. If you want to contact us, you can email thetomeshow@gmail.com. You can tweet at Tracy, who didn't make it with us tonight. She is at Sarah Dark Magic, and she writes at sarahdarkmagic.com. You can tweet at me. I'm at Squatch, SQUACH. Eric is at Eric with a C, M, and Pack, P-A-Q. And the show is at The Tome Show, which you want to definitely go check out because of that contest going on right now that is talked about more over at the Tome Show's Twitter account. You can also watch our stream of our episode recordings over at twitch.tv/tomeshow, like several people are doing right now. I see a few people, and Steal Your Mind was here at the beginning and chatting with us. And there are some other people that are watching, or maybe listening but not chatting. That's okay too. That is a perfectly acceptable way to engage in the stream. If you want to find show notes and other great Tome Show shows, go to thetomeshow.com. That is our thoughts on Dragons of Winter Night. Up next in July, we will be reading The Crimson Legion by Troy Denning. Eric, you want to have any last words?
Looking forward to go back to the arts.
Keep turning the page, Tomites. And that's where that ends. Say goodbye to the stream. Goodbye to the stream and anybody who might be watching on YouTube. They get to see just how much I scratch and play with my beard when I record. So, yeah. See, Eric's
stuff here is
hair.
starting to open up. Yeah.
All right.
Stuff is